In this short video, we'll be looking at some of the genres in the classical period. We'll start with the symphony. This should be somewhat familiar because last week you heard quite a bit of symphonic music. This was the major genre that was developed by classical composers. The origins of the symphony go back to a late 17th century Italian opera overture which was called the Sinfonia. The Sinfonia was a single movement instrumental work in 3 sections. It's fast, slow, fast. And then it was eventually removed from the opera house, and then it was expanded into 3 independent and distinct movements. Eventually, a 4th movement was added. Actually, the minuet, this inserted dance movement, and then the fast movement became the 4th movement. So this is what we were looking at last week, the 4-movement plan. This slide shows you the development of the classical orchestra. On the left, it has the basic Baroque orchestra. This I took from a different book, so the page number won't help you, but this would be the instrumentation that you would find, for example, in Vivaldi's Four Seasons, where you have mostly strings. It's violins. They're divided into 2 groups, firsts and seconds, violas, cellos, and basses, and then there would be some kind of keyboard instrument. In the Vivaldi, it would be the harpsichord, or it could be an organ in another piece. And you'll see that that goes away. The festive Baroque orchestra that's listed on the top right would apply to the Lully French overture that we heard and some of the music by Handel, where in addition to the strings, pairs of winds and brasses and sometimes percussion were added. So that, as you remember, it kind of varied from movement to movement. But sometimes we did hear the inclusion of winds and brass in Baroque music. What happens in the classical orchestra is it becomes standardized. You can expect to see these 4 different families of instruments: strings, woodwinds, brass, and percussion. You have as an example of a symphony in Chapter 19, the first movement of the Symphony No. 40 in G minor by Mozart. After listening to it and taking the listening exercise, you'll hear how the woodwinds and brass have their clearly defined roles, but the strings are still at the heart of the piece. Even though you only are given the first movement of this amazing piece, I hope you take the time to check out the remaining movements, because this is one of the best symphonies ever written. Another important genre that was born in the classical period is the string quartet. You'll see how the string quartet borrows some of the same features that you see in the symphony, although this would be a much smaller group. The string quartet is made up of only 4 players. The string quartet is a type of chamber music. We've seen this before. We saw it in the Baroque with the trio sonatas. Those are chamber sonatas, and we also heard an example of a chamber cantata. The chamber music, just to remind you, is music that's played by a smaller group, like a string quartet or a piano trio. Usually these were performed in a small concert hall or a private residence. You can think of a chamber piece as being a piece that's made up of 1 player per part. We have as an example in our book the great Haydn Emperor Quartet, 2nd movement. Well, here's what a string quartet looks like. This is a album cover from a Beethoven, some Beethoven recordings. It shows you the 4 instruments in the string quartet, and I would like you guys to know this. The string quartet is made up of 2 violins. They're exactly the same instrument, but they each have their own part, and then a little bit bigger, of course, is the viola, and then there's the cello. The story is that Haydn invented the string quartet one summer at Esterhazy. There were supposed to be 3 violins, but one of them was missing, so Haydn sat in playing viola, and voila, the string quartet was born. He wrote 68 of them, and his friend Mozart wrote string quartets, and Beethoven wrote what's considered to be some of the best music ever written for the string quartet. If you've seen the movie Titanic, and if you haven't seen it, I won't tell you how it ends, but in the version with Leonardo DiCaprio, the quartet is playing, and they say, "What a pleasure to have played with you, gentlemen." And anyway, that version of the quartet has a violin, viola, cello, and bass, I believe. But you could create your own kind of string quartet any way you wanted to. But this is the traditional standard string quartet: 2 violins, viola, and cello. Oftentimes the first violin has the higher notes, maybe more of the solos. You'll see in the hands of Haydn, however, that each of the parts is treated independently. And I do want to take a minute and talk about chamber music. I love playing chamber music. As a bassoonist, I play in a woodwind quintet. What I like about it, it's more intimate. The concerts are more intimate. The parts are independent. Playing chamber music is more of a challenge because your part is more independent. And if you're not paying attention, you're sunk. It's really fun to watch chamber music as well. In fact, in Albuquerque, every June there is something called Chamber Music Albuquerque. Actually, Chamber Music Albuquerque has performances that take place various times during the year. But in June, this organization brings in world-class string quartets. Be really world famous, top-notch groups. Students only have to pay half price to get in, and it's just really fun watching some of these groups. So the great composers wrote string quartets, and you will see them in action. Sometimes the players are so animated that you wonder if they're ever going to fall off the stage because they move. The chamber pieces, chamber music doesn't have a conductor, and so that's also fun to watch because the players have to communicate with themselves by breathing, maybe raising their eyebrow, body language, and watching groups that have played together for many years is really exciting. So I hope if you haven't seen a chamber concert that you take the chance sometime to go to one. There's lots of student concerts at Keller Hall, but in Albuquerque there's many other professional concerts that take place all the time. We're really lucky to live in Albuquerque. Structurally, the string quartet is like that of the symphony. It's made up of the four-movement design, the sonata cycle, which means that the first movement, it might have a slow introduction or not, but it's usually in a fast sonata allegro form. The second movement could be anything. Haydn was very fond of theme and variations form, so that's what we have as an example. The third movement would be the inserted dance movement, which would either be the minuet or, as Haydn sometimes he chose the scherzo. In either case, they were both ternary form movements, and then the last movement would usually be the fastest, usually sonata form or rondo. Okay, so the second movement is what we have, and it's a theme and variations form. The theme he actually wrote, and it was he wrote it for the Emperor Francis, Gott erhalte Franz den Kaiser, God save the Emperor Francis. It was first sung at the Emperor's birthday and then later became the Austrian national anthem. This is a very well-known tune. It's, as I said, it's become the Austrian national anthem and that of Germany as well. The melody consists of 4 symmetrical phrases, each 4 measures long, with the last phrase repeated. And let me show you the chart in your book. You can see that the melody is mostly conjunct, which makes it seem singable, and you'll see the 4-bar phrases there. Listen to this while you follow along with the listening guide, because it shows you that each of the 4 instruments has their moment. This is one of his later works, and it's written in his mature style, and it's nice because it's not just a melody with accompaniment. Each of the 4 players has the melody at some point in the various variations. I'm also going to put a recording or a link to a YouTube video in the resources folder, which is a really fine performance, so I would ask that you watch this video as well. Okay, I hope you like this music.